Welcome to the Golden Com podcast. Today's special guest and special friend, Coach Mark Gottfried. Mark Gottfried, welcome to the show.
Thank you. It's exciting to be sitting in this chair instead of that chair, so I like it.
I'll flip the script on you. So those of you who don't know Coach Gottfried, he has his own podcast, which I want to get to. I actually want that to be the focus of it. But I got to make sure the audience that's not 100% sure who you are, if you wouldn't, you have this historic basketball career where you have played and coached at the highest level. And you've got some stories that are around elite performance, which I would love to talk about. But your lifetime commitment to coaching and what you're doing now is where I want to end up. But you got to start me where you grew up. Mm-hmm. I got to start from the beginning so we can go through. So where were your formative years? Where did you grow up?
So what happened with me was my dad was a high school basketball coach in North Central Ohio, and he grew up in Ohio, and so I was born there and lived there till I was, I think, 13. And so we bounced around, and he coached at different high schools, and then he had the opportunity to become a small college basketball coach, Division III, in a little town called Ashland, Ohio. And so I was always around it and around coaching and around basketball. And then my dad became the head basketball coach at Southern Illinois University. So we moved to Carbondale, Illinois for a couple years. My dad ended up getting out of coaching, and he became the athletic director at the University of South Alabama, which is in Mobile, Alabama. So my family, we moved around a lot, and then we ended up, and my parents are still there, so they've been in Alabama now, I think, for 43 years. But Alabama has become kind of a transplanted second home. So I always grew up around sports, basketball. I was in locker rooms of his teams when I was a little bitty guy. I was sat on the end of the bench, and was a ball boy and all that. And so I was always around it. And then, I had the opportunity to play and, to become a pretty good player. And I always got to play against his teams as I got a little older. When I was younger, I couldn't. But I got into high school, and he was a Division I, basketball coach at kind of a mid-major type school, Southern Illinois. And as a ninth grader, every now and then they would let me get in like a pickup game with them. And but I was just a little too young, a little too scrawny. And then as a sophomore, it was a little more. Then as a junior, I started saying, okay, I'm better than some of these guys, and within a year or two, I'm going to be the best player. I could be the best player on that. So I started to feel that because I was playing against really good players. So anyway, I grew up around it. My dad was a great influence on me as a basketball coach, and majority of his coaching was at high school, small college, and he had great success, and so that was a whole lot of fun for me.
That's awesome. It's awesome. So you end up having a great high school career, mm-hmm. I would imagine. Mm-hmm. Got recruited, mm-hmm. and where'd you go first?
So my recruiting visit, it was interesting, my whole thing, because I had moved prior to my senior year of high school. So I moved from Illinois into the state of Alabama. And I took some official visits. I visited Duke when Mike Krzyzewski was just finishing he's actually in the middle of his first year. And they were 11 and 18, and they weren't very good. Nobody really had heard of him or anything. I visited Ohio State. I visited, so it was Duke, Ohio State, Alabama, Auburn, and then I visited Oral Roberts University. And most people scratch their head because I decided to go there. I only was there 1 year. But that was because of their head coach. He was really a wonderful guy. They actually had a really good team with about 3 pros on their team, NBA kind of pros. And so at that time, I went there. And that coach ended up getting fired and ended up transferring back to Alabama. And when that decision came to transfer, it was either going to Alabama or Kansas. And my family was all in Alabama, and so I ended up back there. But I ended up having this wonderful playing career in college, and most of that was at the University of Alabama.
And what years are these?
So I went to Oral Roberts in, 82, 83, and then I was at Alabama. Now, back then, different than this new transfer portal era in college athletics where you don't have to sit out a year. Back then, we had to sit out. So in between my year at Oral Roberts and then the year at Alabama, I had to sit 1 year, go to school, but I could practice, just couldn't play in the games. And then I had 3 years left there at the University of Alabama, and we had great teams. We went to the Sweet 16 in the NCAA tournament all 3 years. We won the SEC championship as a senior. And he wore these plaid jackets, and he really had an amazing run there for about 11, 12 years as the head coach. And then right after our group was a really good, talented group, and some of the names people may not remember. A guy like Derek McKee played 15 years in the NBA. Keith Askins played 10 or 12, and we can go through the list. I got drafted by Detroit. My roommate got drafted, Jim Farmer by Dallas. And a few other guys as well. But right after us then became Robert Ory, Laterrell Sprewell. I mean, they had a run then with some high level guys that, really kind of went to a whole nother level. But we had just a great time. I loved playing there. I loved playing for him. It was a lot of fun. To the finals, and they were the bad boys back then, and they got beat by the Lakers. And then I was coming in this next year, and they had a really good team, and I hung in there for a pretty good while, and eventually got cut. And then I played with a team called Athletes in Action for years, a Christian basketball team. We traveled all over the world, and then at the end of that year, Detroit reached out. They re-signed me, brought me back to Detroit for that second run. And, that was in the era, a lot of people remember Isaiah Thomas and Joe Dumars, Dennis Rodman, Bill Laimbeer. And, again, I kind of hung in there for a while. And then the opportunity came to start coaching. And it was at UCLA. And so I was kind of at a crossroads. And so I decided, I'm going to pursue coaching rather than playing. And it turned out to be really a really good decision.
Okay, so on to Westwood. Mm-hmm. Where there's John Wooden buildings everywhere, and Herrick is there. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Is he the head coach?
Jim got hired in April, and he brought me on as the graduate assistant, meaning a lot of people, ask me, what does that mean sometimes? It's almost like being an intern. You're going to school, taking graduate classes, and, but you're kind of learning how to coach. And I was in that role for 1 year. And then at the end of that year, we had a couple of our other assistants become head coaches. And Jim Herrick immediately promoted me up. And so I ended up staying 7 years. And my time at UCLA was just special. It really was. And, John Wooden had been retired for a number of years. I came to UCLA in Jim Herrick's first year, so we were there together his first 7. And just kind of restoring they had kind of fallen off. The 2 coaches before that, hadn't done as well, and they were just kind of good but never great. And then the opportunity to meet John Wooden and kind of hang around Coach Wooden. It was one of those that you just, when you're young, you don't really understand the value of that. Then when you get older, you look back and you go, wow, what an opportunity as a 23 to 30-year-old guy. That basically I had access to, I would argue with anybody out there, the greatest coach of all time. And just to call him up and say, Coach, I'm going to stop by your house. And he'd say, sure, come on over. And we'd sit and talk. And so we ended up over a 7-year period just having, I couldn't tell you how many, it was maybe 100, I don't know. We just all the time, we're just sitting down and talking about life and how he coached and different lessons he wanted to always teach. And it was just you sit at the foot of somebody like John Wooden, and later in life you realize, wow, what a blessing that was. What an amazing opportunity that was.
It's unbelievable just to think that you could just hang out in his living room and just pick his brain
all the time.
And he was retired.
He was retired. He was retired. And he really took to at the time I was married, and got to know my children a little bit. They were very young at the time. And he was just one of these guys that was always accessible, always available. Never, ever one time did I feel like he was pushing me out of the living room there, the study. If it was a half hour or 3 hours, it didn't matter to him. We would sit and talk. He loved Bob Newhart, the show. sometimes I would leave UCLA, and he lived there in kind of Encino, Tarzana area there, and I was living in Calabasas, so I had to drive on the 101 right past the exit. And this is before cell phones, obviously, but I would sometimes call from the locker room and say, Coach, I'm getting ready to leave. Do you mind if I stop by? And he'd be like, absolutely, come on. And we'd sit there and a couple of times watch Bob Newhart. And then I would, ask him a question about leadership or integrity or, the situation in coaching. How would you handle that? And, anytime you talk to Coach Wooden, his answers were almost in parables. He would begin to tell a story. And if I said, well, how do you talk to me about leadership? Well, then he would just go into a story about one of his players. And so very wise, obviously, but very brilliant person to have that opportunity to sit with.
What was Herrick's relationship with Wooden?
I think they always had a very positive relationship. I don't know that they were super close. Coach Wooden never wanted, because he realized how big his presence was, he never wanted to be the guy that he felt would be kind of hovering over the program. Now, he would come to every game. He would not come to a practice. We tried. We all tried. He just felt like that's just not appropriate. And, he wanted the coach, whoever that was, that followed him, and I think we were the fourth coaching staff to follow him, but to stand on your own 2 feet, kind of that type thing. But I think Jim and Coach Wooden had a good relationship, and they spent a lot of time together as well. And we would take our staff many times. We'd drive out to the Valley, and we'd sit and eat breakfast with Coach Wooden. And I remember right when I got to UCLA, it was the fall of 1988, and I'm brand new, and Coach Wooden turned 80. Well, that's the way life works. When you get to be about 80 and you have a birthday, people start showing up because they're not sure how many more there's going to be, I guess. I don't know. But I walk into this room, and again, I'm a basketball junkie because I've grown up around it my whole life. I've followed it. I watched some of those teams when I were little. And here comes Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, Bill Walton, Marcus Johnson, Sidney Wicks, Curtis Rowe, Keith Erickson. The list was, there was 30 of them like that, that were basketball icons, Dick Enberg was the play-by-play guy on the radio back in those days, and so he was working for NBC, I think, at the time. He was there. I mean, it was one of those nights where you just look around the room and go, wow, whoa.
You're 25?
I'm 23 or 24.
Unbelievable.
And I just remember, and back then there was no cell phone cameras and all that, but you're just in it. You're in the moment. And that was kind of my first, indoctrination into UCLA basketball right there.
You are in California.
It's like, this is a whole nother level here. We've had great players around the country, but when you put them all in one room and they're from UCLA, especially with Kareem and Bill Walton, you got two of the greatest that have ever, laced up tennis shoes, and that was pretty special.
Now, were you on staff? I know you were. You were on staff when you guys won it at UCLA.
Yeah.
So the Final Four national champions. Mm-hmm. How old are you there?
So I was 30 years old, and what happened about 4 years before that year, all the assistants became head coaches, and so Coach Herrick promoted me. I think I was 26 years old. I hadn't ever recruited anybody in my life. Zero. I mean, I'm watching, I'm learning. But next thing you know, I'm in my car driving down here to Mater Dei in Orange County, and I'm driving all over the place, and I'm introducing myself to these coaches and players. And so in that role, probably the last 4 or 5 years, I did a lot of the recruiting and helped kind of build our staff, to be honest. Lorenzo Romar and Steve Lavin joined us. I was instrumental in bringing those two guys there. And then we just had this amazing run. We had good teams, but the team in '95, obviously we won the national championship. We were 31-2. It was an unbelievable, magical year. Ed O'Bannon was the National Player of the Year, obviously the Pac-10 Player of the Year, all that. And we go to Seattle. We make it to the Final Four, and it's in the Kingdome, which has now been destroyed and torn down. But we played Oklahoma State in the first game on Saturday, and we had to play Arkansas, who was the defending national champs, on Monday night. So it was just one of those magical years that I was able to be a part of.
Amazing. Yeah. Now, we'll get to your podcast, but Herrick was on your show, and could he be the world's nicest guy?
He's amazing.
Do they make him any nicer than him?
You know, I came to UCLA and I was married at the time, and for the first number of years didn't have children. But for 7 years, I tell people this all the time, we spent Christmas and Thanksgiving Day at his house with his wife and children. And, he just kind of, he was that way with everybody, but he really kind of took to me as well. So he and I we just ended up with a really neat relationship, and he was just wonderful. And he was like that way with me throughout my entire career. When I coached at Murray State and Alabama and NC State, we're on the phone every week or two talking about our team. He was always that guy I could bounce an idea off of, or, this team plays this zone, coach, what did you do when your team, all those type things. And he just always was a phenomenal resource and became just a really, really good friend, over the years.
Yeah. So you said Murray State. So it sounds like Coach Herrick did such a good job with his assistant coaches that they all left.
That's a good sign.
Yeah,
that's a good thing.
Well, I mean,
and he took pride in that.
Yeah.
Which as when I became a head coach, we all do. You want your guys to grow up and go out and get their own jobs, as head coaches.
Yeah, including teaching you how to recruit, which I would imagine is 50% of a head coach.
Probably more than
maybe
50.
more, yeah.
Because you got to have good players. So, yeah, he was great. In every facet of it, he really did a good job helping me.
So you go to Murray State and do a quick stint there, and you have some success there. And then homecoming.
Yeah, it was interesting, that story, because after my second year at Murray State, we had done really well, and I was offered both the Georgia and the Tennessee job. And the Alabama job, which was my alma mater, their coach there was struggling. And a lot of people were saying, I think about one more year, that thing's going to maybe open up. But I didn't know that. We didn't know. And so I hung in there and stayed at Murray one more year. And then that year ended up being just one of those special years. We were 29-3. We had beaten Arkansas in Puerto Rico and Iowa State, and we had an unbelievable team for Murray State. And then at the end of that year, Alabama job had opened, and they offered me the job, and that was exciting for me to go back to the school that I'd played at.
Okay, and how long at Alabama?
So I was there 11 years at Alabama as the head coach.
And then many tournament entries there.
Yeah, we had 5 in a row, won the SEC championship, went to the Elite Eight, the only time in school history. We got ranked number 1 in the country, the only time in school history still to this day. So we had some amazing things. And it reminded me, just came into my mind, I can remember prior to taking the job at Alabama, I called Coach Wooden. And I said, Coach, I got an opportunity to go to my alma mater at Alabama. And I said, but, I want to ask you, because when you were at UCLA all those years, Coach Wooden had played and was a Hall of Fame player at Purdue. A lot of people don't realize that. He's in the Hall of Fame as a player and as a coach. But I said, Coach, you never went back to your alma mater. Why is that? And he said, well, Mark, just remember, the expectations will always be higher for you at your alma mater. You'll put more pressure on yourself, and other people's expectations will be higher than anywhere else you ever go. And I thought about it, but I kind of was like, okay, that sounds interesting. But then when I took the job at Alabama, I realized he was 100% true, because you want to deliver for your school.
Right.
You're wanting it so bad for your own school, but then also people are also wanting you to do well, so the expectation becomes higher, and it's a tricky thing. And so I've shared that with a lot of coaches over the years that have had that same opportunity. There's not a right or wrong answer, but his advice to me was spot on.
And during that period, you had brought that team to number 1 in the country. Coach, I mean, if you're sitting where I'm sitting, you are the CEO, head coach of the number 1 team in the country, whether you held it for a week or 2, I don't know how long you held it for. That is amazing. That is the highest level. That really is.
And it was interesting because Alabama is such a phenomenal great football school. It really is. I mean, the fans follow football. They follow every nook and cranny of everything. And so
Alabama's a football team?
so with basketball, sometimes you're kind of over there like, hey, we're here too, we're around. And that particular year, it was during Christmas. And so I just remember I woke up on Christmas morning and kind of you wake up and go, you know what? We're number one in the country. It's a pretty good Christmas present.
That's pretty good.
Pretty neat.
Boy, the pressure that must come with that, though. I mean, everyone's after you. Everyone's after you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we're going to get to NC State next,
Mm-hmm.
okay? But now, the philosophy, your coaching philosophy, do you bring that with you? And is it the same at UCLA as it is at Murray? Or do you use wrinkles of it? And then Murray is not nearly as big of a program as Alabama. Does it change? Tell me about the philosophy that you've carried throughout your career.
I think it's true in just about anything in any walk of life or business. You have a foundation that's pretty much that you've developed in your own mind of how you want to coach and how your team wants to look and how you're going to play. And there's kind of a foundation that's there. This is our rock that we're going to build off of. Then from there, yeah, you're always tweaking. You see things. You're adding things. You're trying to improve as a coach all the time. So you're constantly still evolving. But I don't know that the foundation ever changes. I don't know that coaches can just, or very few coaches that I know can just completely recreate themselves. Okay, I'm going to forget everything I ever did at one place and do something different. So philosophically, I think the foundation is there, and then from that, you just keep trying to improve and get better and get better. But I don't think, for me, I never wanted to get all the way away from my core principles. Mm-hmm. Not only just offense and defense and how you're going to play and all that. That's part of it, but also how you're going to recruit. Because what was good for you at one school can be good for you at the next. And I just don't know that coaches can completely recreate themselves. Mm-hmm. I just don't think that's possible.
I guess why I paused here is because you're at Alabama, which you played for, so you know how it's done in Alabama, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And so I would imagine you bringing your philosophy to Alabama, plus knowing how Alabama does things, mm-hmm. how the AD does things, mm-hmm. how you interact with the students and how you recruit. Then you go to NC State, mm-hmm. which arguably the ACC is higher level than the SEC mm-hmm. in basketball, yeah. right? And I think the ACC is probably the pinnacle mm-hmm. of college basketball. Mm-hmm. And so that's a big-time job. Mm-hmm. It just got bigger. Yeah. How do they look at you and say, well, Mark, we understand we've hired you. We want you to bring your philosophy and coaches. Mm-hmm. But at NC State, this is how we do things. Mm-hmm. Do they do that there?
It's a little bit like that, but somewhat. And really, I think in college, really in any coaching, pro coaching, college coaching, at the end of the day, it's all about whether or not you can deliver and if your teams are going to win. And if you do, they don't care if you're Humpty Dumpty. They'll get behind you and they'll be excited. And one day they'll push you off the wall probably and you'll shatter like Humpty Dumpty. But you got to win. And I think that's the bottom line. But I can remember going to NC State, and I'll give you a great example. When I coached at Alabama, in the off season, the summertime, the people are getting excited about football's getting ready to come up. You get into the fall, football season has started, and then basketball kind of starts in their late fall. And, I get to NC State, and they hire me in March. And in June, the athletic director says, we're going to do a press conference next week. And I said, for what? What's going on? She goes, oh, no, everybody, they would just kind of want to get an update. I said, well, I've only been here for 2 months, and nothing's really changed yet. I mean, And she said, oh, no, we got to do a summer press conference. Okay. So I walk into where we're going to do the press conference on the day of the press conference. And if we would have done that at Alabama, and I'm not knocking Alabama, I love it there, it's just a different climate of whatever. If I would have had a press conference in Alabama for basketball in the summertime, I might have had 3 or 4 reporters. They may have showed up, maybe at one TV station, I don't know. I come in June in Raleigh, North Carolina. You have to remember, NC State is in Raleigh, and Raleigh is 15 miles from Duke and 15 miles from North Carolina. So the triangle of Duke, UNC, and NC State, it's a basketball hotbed. I mean, probably nowhere in the country is the same as that. So I walk into this press conference in June. I have no idea what I'm getting ready to walk into. Matter of fact, I don't even have anything to talk about. I'm just ready. I'm just walking in. And there must be 150 people there. There must have been 25 television cameras and reporters, and there's 10, 15 rows of people. And I'm like, okay. This is a tad bit different here. And
you're not doing this anymore.
I don't have to do that. And so I'm saying, okay, here we go. And so it's just a whole, the concentration and the fans' attention to basketball is so much greater there than it was at most schools in the SEC.
Great. And you had a great run at NC State. You won a lot of basketball games. I know you finished your career out here at Northridge. But when I added it all up, Coach, we're at 400 wins. Yeah. What number is that?
It's up there somewhere.
It's up, yeah.
And again, I've learned this from Jim Herrick, and he, you know, I'm the same as him in the way I'm not a bitter guy. I think coaching is a tough business. I had a guy tell me one time, I was a defensive coordinator at Alabama who I loved, this old guy named Joe Kynes. I just loved him to death. And he told me one day, he said, Mark, just remember coaching is a great profession, but it's a bad business. And he was true. And so there's a lot of times we as coaches, some of us get to leave on our own terms. You know, there's a handful of them. But there's a lot of coaches, too, that for one reason or another, you get fired and you know, it maybe doesn't end the way you want it to. But I've never wanted to be a guy that's bitter, walking around and grumpy and mad at the world and mad at everybody. And I would rather look at my run, and like you said, I've had over 400 wins and had amazing teams and lots of fun, great success. It's just it was such a blessing. It was just such a cool thing for me. And I was a head coach for 20-something years, and I coached for 30, I think 3 overall in college. And so I just had a great run. And so I'm just not a guy that's going to pout around and say, you know, it didn't end the way I wanted it to end. I won't go there.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a great story. It's a great achievement. Since you had a dad that took you to the gym every day, I respectfully don't know if it really sits in how many wins that is. When you're a guy like me and you're talking to a guy like you, it's unfathomable on what a career you've had. So I just want to give you that.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, okay, then we're out of coaching. And you still got some juice. So ESPN, is that what you did?
ESPN was actually in between Alabama and NC State.
Okay.
So, and that was fun. You know, I was doing games on TV as an analyst. I did probably 150 games in 2 years and had a ball with it.
Well, let's get to today, and let's talk about the front row with Coach Mark Gottfried.
There you go.
So a little bit of background here is this podcast studio is where you do your new podcast. And you were one of our walk-in clients, which is really interesting. We put this podcast studio next to a very popular tavern and a very popular Mexican restaurant, and it must have caught your eye. Were you driving back and forth? And I remember when you came in.
Yeah. Well, the story is that about 3 doors down across the street is a tire store, and my sister was visiting from Alabama. I need a new tire, so we pulled in there. I said, "Hey, I think I need a new tire," and they said it's going to be a couple hours, and I said, "Okay." And so I walked across the street, and I was going to find some place to get something to eat, my sister and I, and then we saw the sign. It said, "Podcast Studio." I said, "Okay, let me walk in there and see what's going on in this building," and that's kind of how I ended up in here.
Well, it's God at work, I guess. Because one of the highlights for me over the last year and a half has been meeting you. And while I think we've done some good work together, I think the best is yet to come. But I want to talk about this Front Row podcast that you're doing and the guests that you've had on the show. And so I walk in here sometimes and you got a guest. I got Dabo Sweeney here talking about Alabama. And what's your relationship with Dabo?
So when I got to Alabama as the head coach, Dabo was an assistant coach on the football team. And I think for 2 years we overlapped, and then that staff got fired. And so Dabo was out, and he tells the whole story on my podcast. But so we kind of go back. And then, He ends up at Clemson and I'm at NC State. And so now we're both in the ACC. And with these two Alabama guys, so they would have our spring meetings with the football coaches and basketball coaches. And we just kind of kept, friendship kept growing and growing. And we'd sit in the pool and drink a beer and just, talk for hours. And so, over time, he's just become a really good friend. And, but we go way back. I guess that's probably to 1980, maybe 1988 is maybe when I met him. No, 1998. So,
well, you guys are tight because he was prepping for a bowl game and he was on your show. I'm like, how did he do that? You must have great assistant coaches. Then Cedric the Entertainer is who you kicked it off with. Yeah. That was your first one. How did you meet Ced?
So I got some friends, the Pump Brothers, who were on the podcast. They introduced me to Ced. And then Ced and I, even though they introduced us, we just started to spend more time together. I'd have some, guys hanging out at the house watching basketball or football. And he didn't live far from me at the time. So he would come over and sit and, watch TV. And we had a couple little parties with some of my buddies and friends. And just an unbelievable down-to-earth person. And then I've got to know his wife and his children, and we just became friends in that regard. So, I see Cedric on CBS doing his show, The Neighborhood. I see him, doing all these amazing things. But kind of to me, he's just a guy. He's just a good guy you want to hang out with and be around. He's the superstar stardom that he has. To me, he's just a good dude, and we just like hanging out.
Well, I think people like talking to you, Coach. Yeah, and I think coaching is a higher calling. As a coach, you are wired to see and get the best out of everyone. I mean, is that kind of what coaching is?
That's to be good at it. That you have to be good at what you just said, without a doubt.
That is the mission. That is the calling of a coach. So when people come into your show, I just love watching it because I get to see you ask these great questions, and like you can just see because of your coaching background, you can see I'm gonna perform really well here. Yeah, and what you bring out of these guys. Some of the questions. What are the questions that you're asking these people? Are there some? You're asking them about their philosophy. You also ask about kids. Tell me what the question is about the kids.
Well, I love to ask people. I don't want to be monotonous with it every show, but I love to ask people. That this one question, because I have 5 children. And 2 of mine are married. 3 more are single, but I'm sure at some point they will. So I kind of have 7 all of a sudden because we have the 2 married. But if in fact if we all go back as parents and you say, boy, if I could give my child a characteristic, and parenting is hard. That's one thing people, most of us that have children know, parenting is difficult. And but if you could just kind of sprinkle the dust and say, man, you can have this characteristic. And I love hearing everybody's answers, for their own children. You take a guy like Jim Boeheim, who's won a national championship at Syracuse. He's a Hall of Famer. Gary Williams, Jim Herrick. Those 3 guys all won national championships, by the way. They've all been on the show. 3 national championship coaches. Dabo, Cedric, DJ Caruso, who directed, Disturbia and 2 for the Money and all these amazing shows. He's a phenomenal Hollywood director. And, I can go through all these guys. David Feigenbaum, that story was off the charts, and he's just a wonderful person. But I love listening to the answers and how different they are as far as what somebody sees as the most important thing. I wish my children had this. I want them to have that, whatever that is. And I just think it's a great learning tool for all of us, that we can learn from each other to say, wow, okay, that's great insight. I never thought about it that way, or maybe I did. So anyway, I've enjoyed that part of the show.
Great insight. Any players? I know Mo was on the show. Any players that you've got scheduled that are coming up?
Well, Mo Williams was, he played for me at Alabama and played 15 years in the NBA, and that was a phenomenal. He and I are, we talk all the time, so that was just a natural. But there will be some other really good ones. I've got a lot of former athletes kind of lined up and ready to come on the show. And some really interesting people. And I tell people all the time, if I do 100 podcasts, 75 of them will probably be people in sports, just because that's my background. But I've also enjoyed, kind of going out of that a little bit here and there. And like DJ Caruso, for example, or David Fagenbaum, Johnny O'Donnell, who started Johnny O's, the clothing line, and just hearing their story, and because we all can learn from each other all the time, and sometimes it might just be one thing, one small thing they did that might motivate somebody else to say, you know what, I could do that, or I was afraid to take that chance. I need to take the chance and go for it, And you listen to some of these guys and how they got to where they are and the success level they've attained. It's not easy. There's probably a little luck along the way here and there, but they've made the right moves. They've had great resilience. They've had great ambition. They weren't going to be denied one way or another, and it's really cool to kind of put it all together and hear those stories from everybody.
Yeah, I agree. And the front row, obviously, is basketball play on words that you're up close seeing life here from the front row with your guests. Okay, you're a resident of Newport Beach now. What's next for Coach Mark Gottfried?
I've enjoyed the podcast world a lot. I'm learning it. It's a little more interesting as far as how you grow it than I maybe realize. I'm learning, and I think we can always keep learning all the time. I think a book is probably on the horizon here. It's coming. I've been able to do a few, corporate speaking events. I'd love to do a lot more of those, and just kind of build, that whole kind of a three-pronged tier there with the podcast, a book, and some speaking at the same time. I get asked a lot if I'm done coaching, are you done? And I sometimes don't know how to answer that question because some days I would say, yeah, maybe. And on other days it's like, I kind of miss it, And it'd have to be the right situation for me. But, that's a possibility as well, So I kind of keep everything open. I don't want to shut doors at this stage of my life and just kind of see, what God may bring into my life.
Awesome. Well, since you said God, let me ask you the last question of the day, be a three-pronger. Where do you eat? Where do you church? Where do you play?
Great questions. Where do I eat? Well, there's a lot of great places in this area down here. I got a lot of favorites. Mastro's down in the Ocean Club might be my number one. It's hard to beat that one down there. And Javier's down there, the A down there, those are pretty good. The R&D, I can go on and on. There's about 20 here in this Newport Beach area that I absolutely love. As far as church, I have fallen in love with Mariners Church right here in Irvine, which is really on the border of Irvine and Newport Beach. I had a great church in Los Angeles when I lived there. I was going to Zoe Church, a pastor named Chad Veach, just a phenomenal young loved their church and was really active in that church, and I'm beginning to be more active here at Mariners. I love it. I love the lead pastor, Eric Geiger. I think he's just got, some people have just a gift. They have a gift to explain things in such a simple and kind of a way that you can just grasp it real easy. I don't know, and I think he has that. Some people have that ability, and I think it's obviously learned, but it's obviously, I think it's a gift as well. So I love that. And then where do I play? Now, you brought up a great topic because and people that know me well, I have caught the pickleball bug. I'm all in, and I play a lot here at Bonita Canyon. I've been to the Newport Beach Tennis and Pickleball Center. I play at UCI at Cal Irvine. And I'm the guy now in my suitcase when I travel. I got my paddle and some balls. I'm ready to go. I take it with me everywhere I go. And so I love to do that as well.
Oh, good for you. You met Connor there.
Connor Garnett, who was a guest on the front row.
That's
and
right.
Connor's ranked 4th in the world right now in pickleball. And he's a fun guy.
That's
but
fun
yeah,
guy.
that sport is just blowing up all over the whole world, really. So, but I've caught the bug.
Awesome. Well, I've caught your bug, bud. I'm going to keep watching you, rooting for you. I appreciate you, and it's been an honor to have you on the show.
Thank you. Appreciate it very much.
Thanks, Coach.
Thank you.
got
Thank
it,
you
man.
very much.
You got it.